Hey, what's up, Vox&Hops heads? I'm Matt, the voice of Cryptopsy, and you're listening to my podcast, Vox&Hops, where I normally sit down with fellow metal musicians to talk about their lives, music, and craft beer. But this is another Vox&Hops Metal Brewer Talks, where I sit down with metal brewers and talk about their lives, their love of metal music, and how they got into brewing craft beer. I hope you had a great weekend. I had an excellent time. I met up with some local craft beer celebrities this past Saturday night, and we had an epic bottle share. It was absolutely insane. A 13 bottle blind taste testing. It was very difficult and very enjoyable at the same time. So a huge shout out to Craig from the BAOS podcast and Noah from beerism.ca. And a huge shout out to Derek for hosting us. Thank you so much for an epic craft beer night. It is something that I will not forget anytime soon. This episode is brought to you by Marc-Antoine Ménard, who made a very generous donation towards the podcast. I am blown away and super appreciative. Thank you so much, Marc-Antoine. All you Vox&Hops heads out there, this episode is brought to you by Marc-Antoine. Merci beaucoup. If any of you would like to be as cool as Marc-Antoine, you can go to the Vox&Hops website, www.voxandhops.com, and you click that donate button, and then I'll give you a shout out on the next podcast. On today's Vox&Hops Metal Brewer Talks, I'm with Todd Bujack of Speciation Artisan Ales and Native Species Winery. Here it is, Vox&Hops Metal Brewer Talks.
I warn you, what you are about to hear is very disturbing indeed.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Today I'm with Todd Bujack from Speciation Artisan Ales from Grand Rapids, Michigan. I am super stoked to have you on the Vox&Hops Metal Brewer Talks. I am in love with this beer that you've sent me. I haven't drank it yet. It is probably one of the most metal beers I've ever seen. Let's just take it back right from the beginning. Tell me your brewer story. How did you end up brewing beer? Why do you make craft beer?
So I was actually a truck driver for quite a while, hauling asphalt and doing a lot of construction. And in the off season, a brewery was opening in my hometown called ArcLight in Watervliet, Michigan, and just walked in and basically forced friendship on them, and ended up getting a job as a brewer there. And after about 3 years, I wanted to move back to Grand Rapids. And everybody I talked to just said, go talk to Mitch at Speciation, and basically did the exact same thing there. I don't know if he had much say in it. It just kind of happened.
But you had never brewed before that. You were just hauling asphalt.
Yeah, I tried to homebrew on a stove and took 3 hours to bring 3 gallons of water to boil, and so I figured it probably wasn't a good idea, and I didn't think to use a turkey burner. So
exactly, yes. So what were your first steps going into the brewery? What were the first things that you learned? Who was like your biggest mentor, and what would be some of those early lessons that anyone that wants to start brewing craft beer, what should they be learning?
Well, I learned you learn real fast that there's way more to it than just mixing up some stuff and magically alcohol happens. It's, you get to see the fermentation process and like a carboy and see it move around and everything. You really learn that. I probably should have paid more attention in high school. But the head brewer down at ArcLight, he was always happy to help me learn more about that stuff, and met a lot of people. I've made a lot of friends in the industry, and it's a really, really great industry to learn more, and everybody's just all about asking questions and learning the next thing. So, yeah.
So nobody's an expert.
No.
Everybody just wants to learn more, which is very interesting. It's very close to another thing where metal and beer work together, because there's rarely a moment when any metalhead musician is going to say, nope, I've learned it all. I don't want to learn anything. Any backstage from any tour you see, you got people coming up to my drummer, Flo Mounier, and trying to pick his head, trying to figure out some little techniques from him. Same thing with guitarists, with producers. So it's even the same thing in craft beer world. So I really like that.
Yeah. And now we started getting into the wine, and that's like now blowing everybody's mind. And I definitely don't know enough to tell too many people, and they're always just trying to pick my brain on wine now.
It's very interesting because you guys are also doing organic wine, right?
Yeah, natural wine. We get as organic as we can. We're going to start growing here shortly, I think in the spring. And in Michigan, it's just impossible to really, truly be organic. And we just get the best grapes we can, and it makes really good wine.
I enjoy the bottle that you sent me up.
It was the orange wine, Marsala and Tremonette grapes. It was a little kind of a sparkling thing.
It was delicious. It was almost like a sour beer more than a wine.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the natural wine part of it.
Yeah, since we don't put any like sulfites or anything to really contain it, it just does its thing, and we like to kind of think that we make wine for beer nerds and beer for wine nerds. And
It's true.
They mix pretty well.
And there was no percentage on it, so I wanted to ask you about that. What did that clock in at?
That was about 2.5%, I believe.
Really?
Yeah, so most of them were actually on the lighter side. We put a lot of red wine in spirit barrels, and that kind of, I don't know if it pissed off some wine people, but it made some beer nerds pretty happy. We put one in a bourbon maple barrel, and that one came out to about 16%.
Wow. Okay. Cool. So it was very interesting, and it's native species as your natural wine side of the brewery.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting. What made that come about? A lot of people are tackling beers. They just want to do the trendy beers. I feel like Speciation is not about that. So even, like the beer that I'm holding in my hand, and I'm super stoked to crack, which we're about to do, Mutational Meltdown. The artwork is super sick. It reminds me of Dolly a lot because it's just a bunch of little ants. And this is a really strange brew, a rye whiskey barrel-aged dark sour ale with cacao nibs, coffee, orange zest, and vanilla. So there's nothing normal going on with this beer. And to have a craft beer brewery, instead of just trying to pump out hazy IPAs and jump and claim a market like a lot of people are doing, you guys not only just made weird-ass beers like this one, but you decided to do natural wine. Where did that idea come from?
So I've always enjoyed wine, and Mitch, the owner, when I first started on, he was like, I really want to do like an urban winery where, you get other people's grapes and make wine with that. And so it's always kind of been in our mind. And then the more and more we learned about natural wine and how it really is all about terroir, and it's basically you're making a spontaneous beer, but just with grapes, because it's all the yeast and bacteria that's on the grape that ferments it. So it really does its own thing.
That's really interesting, yeah. Let's crack this sucker. Mutational Meltdown. Super stoked. The artwork. What's the artist's name? I've met him via social media because he enjoys the fact that I wear the shirts all the time.
It's Dave McKee, Art by Graves. He does a lot of our artwork, mostly all the beer, and then he kind of works with our graphic designer, and he kind of translate a little bit onto the wine also a little bit. And I've actually had some fun with some trying to show that I can kind of do artwork on the natural wine side, but it's definitely not at this caliber.
And why the metal theme, though? Are you guys metalheads? Is it just it works with the imagery?
Mitch and I are definitely pretty big metalheads. Mitch's favorite band was Zao growing up, and we actually made a collab where we'll be, I think it's in like May, we're going to be releasing it with Zao. They came out and they had a show in Detroit, and just tasted through some barrels, figured on a good mix, and I'll have some cherries and some vanilla in there, and gin barrel aged golden sour. Be really tasty.
That sounds amazing. I'm jealous. Speciations, cheers. Let's taste this sucker. It smells nice. It smells chocolatey a little bit, and you can definitely get the rye just on the nose. It pours black as my soul. Absolutely, totally opaque. I love it. Like a stout, but it's a sour. It's interesting. Ooh. That's awesome. That's a fucking great beer, yeah.
I've been very hit and miss on dark sours, and every dark sour we do, I've been incredibly happy.
Yeah. Get that rye whiskey. You can taste the chocolate, the vanilla for sure. Go back for that orange zest.
I get there's like almost a hint, and it's almost like that kind of acidity from the orange more than anything, I think. But it's there. Just one of those little things you got to kind of hunt for, I think.
Yeah, and the coffee's there too. It's absolutely incredible, worth the wait. It survived many a night when I could have made a bad decision, but I didn't do it. Talk me through brewing this beer. It's a very complex beer. I know all beer has the same process. You start with a mash, and then you move it on. So when does all this extra stuff get added into this?
Well, so we contract our wort from a brewery in town called City Built, and they brew up a 10-barrel batch, and we don't hop any of our beers until it's fermented and it's hit a pH that we're happy with. It makes so you can turn a sour like this like really, really quick. Of course, it's set in whiskey barrels, so it was a little bit longer, but so it's set in barrels, and then it goes into our like blending tank, where then we kind of use hop bags for cocoa nibs and orange peels and stuff, and it will sit there until we feel like it's got enough flavor character to package up, and everything's bottle conditioned. We also can condition and keg condition everything. There's very little CO2 and no glycol on premise, so like everything's just, we try and keep the rooms nice and warm for fermentation, and it's definitely a different place to be, coming from a much more quote unquote normal brewery with a brew house with temp control and all that stuff. Very interesting, because I've heard, just as the more that I'm speaking with brewers, the more that I'm understanding the game of brewing, that contract brewing is something where you go in, you drop your recipe, and then you walk away, and you can't even do anything with your recipe. We have a pretty good relationship with them, and so we supply the grain. We try and make it as local as possible. There's Empire Malt up north here that makes an incredible Pilsner malt, and so we use that quite a bit. We don't really have too many different malts, and the grain bills are pretty basic, and I think pretty easy to just kind of keep going with that, and it's not a hard beer to really brew up. Like I said, there's no hops, so they don't have to really worry about anything other than start and stopping the kettle during that time. So but yeah, we very happy with the relationship with them, and makes it nice and easy, so we don't have to go buy a brew house.
Exactly, yeah. And the way that you guys are doing it, you still take it back at home, and then you can control everything that's going into it from that point.
Yeah.
As opposed to someone that just keeps it all in the hands of the contract brewers.
Yeah,
you're stuck with that batch, whether you like it or not.
Oh, yeah. And it's a hard thing to, even, we've dumped a couple batches just because they didn't turn out the way we wanted, and that's always like a hard thing to sit there and be like, that's some money going down that drain right now. Yeah,
some money, some time, some ideas, and it's like a band just flushing an album. Speaking of albums and bands, you guys say you're metalheads. What is your brewer's playlist?
I always go straight to Monolord.
I love Monolord. Yeah.
I've been a big Doom fan for a long time. Their new album's great. Just saw them with Blackwater Holy Light, and they have been kind of my big find for this year. That was a great show.
That's awesome. I love it and love Monolord. Yeah. The droney.
Oh yeah, the lower the slower the better.
Talk me through how you became a metalhead. Why do you think, where did the metal come from in your life?
My brother, he was an older brother, and he just always had something playing. It was more kind of radio rock and stuff, and that just kind of led me into what's heavier. And then after high school, a good friend of mine really introduced me to Black Dahlia Murder, and from there it just kind of opened the gates. Went to See Unearth, and I was definitely in where I wanted to be.
At what point you mentioned that I have my answer for this, but why do you think craft beer and metal work so well together?
They work really well. That's kind of the same communities, and I mean, I don't know too many metalheads that don't enjoy a good craft beer. Of course, we're mainly just drinking PBR or something, but when we have like metal night at the brewery, just put on a bunch of vinyl and turn the volume up, and everybody just sits there and drinks sours. We drink wine. We have some Common Descent, our Berliner Weiss, that we always have like a special on can, and that was a surprisingly good thing to start. It's a lot of fun.
Were you apprehensive at first that people would be taken aback because it was too abrasive, or was it something you guys just embraced wholeheartedly?
Mitch and I, it was kind of our brainchild, and Mitch's wife, Whitney, she was definitely on the skeptical side, and Mitch and I were more or less like, if 5 people show up, it's cool. We're just sitting here drinking beer and listening to metal, so it really didn't bother us too much. But the first one was packed, and actually we just had our 1 year last week of Metal Night, and it was even more packed.
Awesome. How big is the tap room? Would a live performance ever be an option?
We've done like some events with like an acoustic band, and that's about as crazy as you can really get. It's a very small 5,000 square feet, and it's kind of half of that is the tap room and the other half is production, so it's definitely not enough room. But Mitch and I have talked a lot about it and how it's not possible, but we really wish it was.
I'd love that, yeah. A small tap room with a little stage.
Mm-hmm.
Bring in some small intimate metal shows. Make it nice and rowdy.
Mm-hmm.
Take me back to your first craft beer. What would be that first experience when you realized that beer could be more than just Miller Lite?
That's a pretty easy answer in Michigan, and that goes almost 90%. Everybody will say Two Hearted. Two Hearted was the first for everybody, and I think the selling point was easily you just buy a 6-pack and you're good for the night type of thing, and then everybody just kind of builds off of that. So
it was efficient.
Oh yeah.
But tasty. What about the Michigan craft beer scene? How is that doing? I personally haven't heard too much about it, so I'd like to hear more. Versus, I've done from touring. I've seen Colorado, Portland, California, New York, all the Boston scenes. I know what those are about. So, who would be some of the heavy hitters of the Michigan scene?
So I think I haven't looked at the numbers in a long time. I think we're nearing 400 breweries in the state, and Grand Rapids, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, on this kind of like reader vote, won Craft Beer City of America or USA. And
really cool.
It's going around like Asheville and Denver and all these other cities, it doesn't quite match up. It's a great beer city, and beer state. There's definitely some ones that really, really come out and everybody loves. Like, we're always pretty popular with that. Transient Artisan Ales down in the Southwest, Homes out in Ann Arbor, Drafting Table, but even way up in the UP, where it's a very weird scene, just because there's miles and miles without anybody but some bears, probably. There's Barrel and Beam, and they do a lot of sours and stuff like that.
I love that, how the states have really embraced the sours, and especially strange, different sours like this. Mm-hmm. I wish that there was more of that happening up here in Quebec, Montreal. We got our fruited sours and maybe some blended sours coming up, but nothing as interesting and as complex as this. So I challenge everyone. What would be some of your most metal breweries that you know of?
Oh, True is always probably number one on that.
Shout out to Zach.
Yeah, I just recently, actually, Mitch and I were up in Petoskey. We were listening to that episode. And he knows Zach. He used to brew out in Colorado at Black Project, and so he knows all those guys pretty well. And that's kind of where he got our process was probably a little stolen from them, but
inspired.
Yeah,
there's enough room for everyone to have fun.
Oh yeah, The guys out at Burial always making killer stuff, and David Paul Seymour makes some crazy artwork for them. And Holy Mountain, they make killer beer and are always, their branding is right on point.
I love it. It just makes so much sense to me. The metal artwork, the proper merch, the shirts that you sent me. I mentioned I wear them a lot because I like them, and they're super. The material's amazing, super comfortable, and I love wearing stuff that up here in Montreal nobody knows what this is, and I wish that more people did, and I wish that more people could get your beers out here. So what would be the limitations, or how could we ever get Speciation beers up here in Quebec? What would be the proper process of doing that?
So the border is the hardest border to kind of cross. Canada is not the easiest to get beer into because you have to send in bottles and they test the ABV and contents, and then it gets approved and things. We actually, the past couple of years, we've been at the Bellwoods Witchstock in Toronto, and I believe it's called Collective Arts Fest, but it was called Liquid Arts. I think they changed it for this year, and those festivals are amazing. It's a great time. Toronto's a great town. Hamilton, just down the road there, is even a great town, and those guys are making some really killer beers too.
Like, to have it being sold in Quebec, what steps would have to be taken? It'd have to be brought in from a distributor?
Yeah, it'd have to go through an importer, and then it goes to a distributor, and it's, we want to get a little bit more into Canada. We're in Australia, out in Europe and everything, and those countries are really, I don't do the paperwork, so I couldn't tell you exactly, but it seems like they're much more easy than even some places here in town. There's a store that you have to kind of pay so many things to file this paperwork and all these things that Mitch just kind of gave up on, saying that we can sell it at our place right down the road, no problem. So
yeah, if people want it, they'll come and get it, that's for sure. Yeah, we have a brewery here in town that's just blowing everything up called Masorum Brassatorium. They are making fire haze right now, and they only sell from their brewery, and it is always sold out. And they cannot keep up. They're doing double shift brewing, quadruple batches or something a day, just killing themselves to try to keep up with the demand. So cheers to Masorum. I keep talking about you guys during these brewer talks, but I'm going to keep talking about you guys because I'm proud of you. You mentioned that Mitch was a huge Zao fan, brewed a beer for them. If you could do a collab with your favorite band, what band would that be? What beer would it be? And what would it be called?
Oh, man. I'd probably have to be with Monolord, and I'd probably call it Alone Together. I love that song. And I don't know, it'd probably have to be on the farmhouse side with a Nordic strain or something. I go out to Gothenburg every once in a while for Beer Fest out in Copenhagen and Helsingborg and things, and every time I kind of pass through, I'm hoping to catch a Monolord in their hometown, and never really happens. So I was really happy to see him in Chicago, but yeah.
That sounds awesome. Listen, Monoload boys. Todd, thank you so much. Taking the time, sitting down with me, sharing one of your beers. This Mutational Meltdown is absolutely delicious.
Thank you.
I really, really enjoy it very, very much. The Rye Whiskey barrel-aged dark sour ale with cocoa nibs, coffee, orange zest, and vanilla. It's a mouthful, and it feels amazing in my mouth. So, cheers. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, thank you all so much for listening right to the end. You know that I love and appreciate that. I had such a great chat with Todd. This Speciation Artisan Ale brews are absolutely incredible. If you can get your hands on them, you absolutely should. They make some of the most interesting, out-of-the-box sours that I have ever had. I am totally blown away by them, and I am just super stoked to taste more of them. I hope that I come through near Grand Rapids so that I can come to the brewery and hang out with you in person, Todd. Thank you so much. Cheers. Devastation on the Nation 2020 is less than 2 months away. If you do not have your tickets to this epic tour featuring Rotting Christ, Borknagar, Wolfheart, Abigail Williams, and Imperial Triumphant, you absolutely should pick them up because some of these shows have sold out, and I can guarantee you that more of them are going to sell out. Devastation on the Nation is proudly brought to you by Continental Touring, Metal Festival Tours, and yours truly, the Vox&Hops Podcast. You can get your tickets via the link in the description of this podcast, or you could simply go to www.metalfestivaltours.com. Trust me, this is a party that you do not want to miss. Devastation on the Nation 2020. Yesterday, I shipped out all of the When in Doubt, One More Stout t-shirts. Super stoked to see all you beautiful Vox&Hops heads receiving them, taking pictures of them, and then you send them back my way, and I'll post them up on all my socials to share the world how cool and beautiful my Vox&Hops heads are. I hope you guys have a great rest of the week. Remember to enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. Cheers, Vox&Hops heads.